Almost a year and a half since Joe Biden secured the electoral votes needed to win the presidency, some 2/3 of Republican voters believe the lie that the election was stolen from Donald Trump through voter fraud. And as I mentioned a minute ago, that includes right here in Massachusetts. A new documentary from FRONTLINE, in collaboration with ProPublica, explores the origins of this lie, who's responsible for advancing it, and how it went from the political fringes to the core of a major U.S. party.
Decertify the November 2020 presidential election.
If you don't think that fraud exists in the election and you don't think the election was stolen, you're either stupid or you're just not that bright.
The film is Plot to Overturn the Election. It premieres tonight at 10 here on GBH2. I'm joined by correspondent AC Thompson and director and producer Samuel Black. Samuel, it's good to meet you. AC, good to see you again.
Thanks for having us on.
Gentlemen, can we start by introducing a place and a man that I'm guessing most people had not heard of before this film? AC, starting with you, what's Antrim County and why does it matter?
Antrim County is a county in remote northern Michigan. It's a small, generally rural area. And during the 2020 presidential election, they had a snafu with the balloting. There was a technical error that led to it looking like, for a moment, that Joe Biden had won this predominantly Republican town, predominantly Republican county. And that sort of ended up being an anomaly that election fraud conspiracy theorists fixated on and used to help create this narrative that there had been massive election fraud all over the country. This was what happened in Antrim County was seized on by the president. And Sam, you should explain the details here.
How about it, Samuel?
Yeah, Antrim County really became one of the origin points for the election fraud conspiracy theories. And the myth of the stolen election, which is what our film really covers, one of its roots is Antrim County. In the aftermath of this human error that caused the votes to be switched there, there was a group that arrived on a private jet and really shocked the local folks there that this group had arrived. And they ended up writing a report about what happened there, but their report was riddled with inaccuracies. But this report was shared with the White House. President Trump shared it with his team. And Trump even quoted from the report on January 6th when he spoke to the crowd outside the White House.
Let me just be clear here also, for those who are watching and saying, well, it's understandable, there's a bias on the part of those who determine whether it was cooked or human error. The woman who was the clerk, AC, you interviewed, she acknowledged openly, I think she said, it's on me. I made the mistake that led to this aberration that was ultimately fixed. I'm correct about that, am I not?
Yeah, absolutely. And she's a Republican who voted for Trump. And I think one of the things that she told us, Cheryl Guy is her name, the county clerk, is that she has just been harassed and abused and threatened by her fellow Republicans, which is a story we saw all over the country.
You know, Samuel, back to you. You mentioned that private plane that came in with people who didn't identify themselves, check through the ballots. We learned later in the film, this is the guy I wanted to ask you about, who most people probably never heard of, that it was funded by a guy by the name of Patrick Byrne. Who's he?
So Patrick Byrne is he's the former CEO of Overstock.com, the online retailer. And he's really one of the biggest figures in this world of people who've spread the myth of the stolen 2020 election. He's one of the biggest funders of the growing movement around this, and he has had a large role in funding audits that have happened in 2021 after Biden's election. Audits, for instance, that we cover in Maricopa County, Arizona, where people have been relitigating the 2020 election. So Byrne is an interesting figure, someone who's really staked his reputation on this issue, but has a background of being a conspiracy theorist in many regards.
And AC, you say to him, if you're right, you save the country. If you're wrong, you destroy the country. And he readily agreed with your summary statement. I want to talk, AC, with you about the spread of this information. once it came out of Antrim County, it was helped along a lot by a gathering at the plantation of Lynn Wood. Lynn Wood is one of those conspiratorial theory lawyers who helped a Trump attempt unsuccessfully to overturn the results. And here you spoke to ProPublica reporter Doug Bach-Clark. General Flynn was there, mentioned that President Trump spoke on the phone with the lawyers there at least once. Here's part of your conversation with him.
We got a hold of well over 1,000 emails, hundreds of text messages of what was happening on the plantation. This set of papers basically shows a set of emails that show how they crafted one of the lawsuits in order to try and get access to the Dominion machines.
So versions of this end up getting used in lawsuits all over the country.
So the next day on 11...
Has anybody ever seen this?
No.
Like,
you know, AC, when you were here a couple of months ago after your terrific film American Insurrection around January 6th and beyond, I asked a question I know is impossible, so I'm going to ask you the same impossible question. Do people at that plantation actually believe this myth, this lie that began percolating out of Antrim County, or did they just seize on it because it was convenient and helpful to their cause?
Yeah, it's still a great question, still impossible to answer, but here's my answer. Overwhelmingly, the people that we met on this reporting journey are true believers. They are absolutely adamant that there was massive fraud in the 2020 election. And so if you're talking about Michael Flynn, if you're talking about Lynn Wood, if you're talking about Sidney Powell, if you're talking about Patrick Byrne, the people that gathered on the plantation and helped disseminate this mythology, the ones that we've encountered and there are people in their circles all tell us they absolutely believe this. Now, the difference is some of the Republican politicians out there, I think, do not believe this. And they're just running on this issue because it is politically expedient. And that's how you cater to the base.
You know, if people also come into this film, Samuel, and say, well, putting aside elected officials or high-ranking Republican infrastructure types, how does the average rank and file believe it? And you make clear in your film, you don't use this term, but I will, the brilliance of Donald Trump, president, but candidate for re-election, essentially grooming the voters, or at least grooming his voters, for the belief that the election is going to be stolen. So when they heard the stories, like out of Antrim County, they were ready for it, no?
That's true. And Donald Trump has been saying that if he didn't win the election since 2016, he's been saying that that would mean that the vote had been rigged. But I think what we found is that it's one thing for the president or former president to say that. It's another thing for the specificity of these conspiracies, theories, is part of what has drawn people in, is part of what has resulted in a situation where now, according to most polls, around 2/3 of Republicans don't believe that Biden was legitimately elected. The specificity of some of these theories, whether it's Dominion machines or other inaccurate claims about the election, that's what the folks we covered lent to this effort. And that's how they've really driven this narrative far beyond what I think Trump could have accomplished alone.
You know, AC, I want to spend the last minute or two talking about the future, and I'll set it up by, you interviewed this Republican, Bill Gates, who was a Maricopa County, Arizona supervisor, concerned by his fellow Republicans' embrace of election lies. He and his colleagues commissioned an analysis of the audit, which he opposed. The audit is a sham. He was threatened with arrest, received a voicemail from Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, and here's part of what he had to say.
I think they believe that they can pick off elections officials, Republicans who are concerned about their future political prospects, and work with these folks to overturn an election, which is despicable.
And what happens to this country if moving forward nobody has faith in our election?
That's the beginning of the end of this country when that happens.
And AC, again, there was a Republican supervisor from Maricopa County. The way they're preparing for 2024 is by trying to knock off people who actually believe in the integrity of the ballot, election officials, secretaries of state, et cetera, and replacing them with the kinds of people you interviewed who buy into the big lie, correct?
The midterms are going to be fascinating because there's a whole slate of big lie candidates running in the Republican primaries. They're all generally endorsed by Trump. And we're going to see if that wing of the party prevails or if the sort of more fact-based wing of the party ends up coming out on top.
And juxtapose on that, before we go, Samuel, is we have Donald Trump giving speech after speech, dropping little tidbit hints that he would be atop the Republican ticket in 2024. So you replace legitimate election officials with those who buy into the big lie, and you put atop the ticket the man who has done more to advance the big lie relentlessly than anybody else. That's the planned scenario, correct?
I mean, what's clear is that Donald Trump's PAC, Save America PAC, has amassed a bigger fortune than the Republican and Democratic parties combined at this point going into 2024. And Trump has been strategically endorsing in many races that presidents previously did not focus on: Secretary of State, state legislature, sometimes state attorney general, offices that will be very important if the 2024 election is contested.
A.C. Thompson, Samuel Black, terrific piece of work, really important. I urge everybody to watch. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.